Welcome to the AFA Alaska TA2 Contract Roadshow. This is the agenda for today's presentation. First, we'll go through introductions and then go over the TA2 details. Then we'll wrap up with additional resources and end the session. I'm Jeffrey Peterson. I'm your MEC president with AFA Alaska. I have been MEC president since 2011 and a flight attendant with Alaska since 1999.
Hi, I'm Sandra Morrow. I have been a flight attendant for 40 years, and I am San Diego based and a member of the negotiating team.
And I'm Bryce McGee, a San Diego-based flight attendant for 19 years. I'm also the San Diego president and on the negotiating team.
Hi, I'm James Bozanich, flight attendant for almost 16 years, San Diego-based, and a member of the negotiating committee as well.
My name is Kiera Jenkins. I have been a flight attendant since 2011. I am Seattle-based and a member of the negotiating committee.
Hi, I'm Paula Mastrangelo. I began working with AFA in 1988 as a staff negotiator, and I have worked on several Alaska contracts, and I was pleased to come back and assist your team with this bargaining session.
We'll be starting this session with the TA2 details, and we've put the really hard-hitting and really juicy bits of the TA2s at the beginning of our presentation, and then we will get into the more nuanced portions towards the end. The date of implementation for TA2 will be March 2nd, 2025. All of the changes will be based on TA1 unless it's noted on that slide. First, we're going to review the economic updates. That includes pay rates, retro pay, pay components like boarding pay, longevity premium, A-pay, holidays and holiday RON, and productivity premium program, as well as market rate adjustment, 401k match, and sick leave cash out.
The following slides will be about boarding pay. We were able to increase boarding pay from 0.42 to 0.5, which is an increase of 19% from TA1. Boarding pay increases your overall pay by 9.6%. This chart shows your boarding pay depending on your step rate. For example, a 5-year flight attendant would receive $21.25 for each boarding. A 10-year flight attendant would be at $29 per boarding, and a top of scale at $37.13 per boarding. Boarding pay will be paid above the reserve guarantee and minimum pay rules, not included for bid credit, line build, or reserve assignment list. Applies toward insurance 480 requirements and PPP. Sick leave will accrue on boarding pay TFP. It's not paid on deadhead or surface deadheads, and a boarding pay calculator will be available. Here are some examples of a few trips and how boarding pay affects their value. This 2-day JFK has a current value of 17.8. Adding 1 TFP for the 2 boardings makes the new value 18.8, with an effective boarding pay raise of 5.6%. This PDX turn has a current value of 9.4. Adding 1 TFP for the 2 boardings makes the new value 10.4, with an effective boarding pay raise of 10.6%. And we have the Seattle trip that has a current value of 22.4. Adding 6 TFP for the 12 boardings makes the new value 28.4, with an effective boarding pay raise of 26.8%. And finally, this Anchorage turn has a current value of 5. Adding 2 TFP for the 4 boardings makes the new value 7, with an effective boarding pay raise of 40%. As you can see, this new boarding rate greatly improves the value of a trip.
Next, we will be discussing pay rates. We started off with the boarding pay because it is critical to understand how impactful boarding pay is when it comes to the overall compensation package for Alaska Airlines flight attendants. You'll notice that for year 1 through 13, there will be no change to the rate that was proposed in TA1. However, at year 14, 15, and 16, the new rates will be $74.25. That is 25 cents above TA1, and an increase of 27.6% at year 14, 25.3% at year 15, and 23.1% at year 16. Typically, the people who will experience more boardings on average are going to be the more junior flight attendants. They'll have a greater opportunity to actualize the effective boarding pay raises, whereas more senior flight attendants who tend to work fewer legs will end up not really actualizing the average of 9.6% increase to their rate. Next, we're going to go over the industry comparison. In this example, we're going to look at American, Delta, and Southwest. You'll notice that in year one, Alaska is at $32 and American is at $32.27. Delta is at $31.98 and Southwest is at $31.14, noting that Southwest does not have boarding pay. At year 16, you'll also notice that we have included the $1 longevity at year 16 that has been restored in TA2. That would bring the new pay rate to $75.25 at Alaska, $74.09 at American, $71.89 at Delta, and $77.43 at Southwest. This puts us in a really good competitive market, and it also ensures that our top of scale is actually top of scale in the industry when looking at the overall compensation package. In this next slide, we're going to walk through the impact of boarding pay. These examples are examples from top of scale earners at various bases. There is a variety of TFP flown in these examples to give an idea of how impactful boarding pay is at the top of scale. In the first example, we have a low time flyer who flies 30.2 TFP at the current rate of 60.31, brings their total to 18.21.36. With the new TA2 rate, that increase just on the rates for TA2 would be $22.42.35 for a total value increase of $420.99 with no change to flying. If we include the 6 boardings that this flight attendant completed, the boarding pay would increase the pay rate even more, the take-home pay even more, to $222.75 with boarding, for a total TA2 pay of $2,465.10. That's a grand total of a $643.74 change in pay with no change in flying, for a 35.3% total increase. And at the top end of the scale, you'll see that you have a high time flyer at the current rate of $60.31, flying 101 TFP, gives them a total of $60.91.31. The new TA2 rate of $74.25, their pay rate will increase to $7,499.25 for a total rate value increase of $14.07.94. If you include the 8 boardings that this flight attendant did, that would increase their pay even more, with $297 coming from boarding pay. That's a TA2 total payout of $7,796.25 for flying this same schedule with no change in behavior, which is a total dollar amount increase of $1,704.94 and a 28% increase in pay. In the next slide, we'll review pay rates and boarding pay for year 1 and year 5 for those who are in the middle of the scale. At year 1, we are going to presume that this flight attendant is a new hire on reserve working 90 TFP as their guarantee. Currently, they're at $24.95, making a total of $22.45.50. At the new TA2 rate, that would be $32 for a new TA2 total rate of $28.80. That's a $634.50 increase on just the rates. In this example, we pulled real data from reserves, and they land anywhere between about 22 to 32 boardings during the month. We used 26 boardings for this example. That increased the pay by $416 just based on the boarding pay. That makes a TA2 total pay of $3,296 with no change in behavior for that flight attendant if they were still working their reserve line, for a total increase of $1,050.50, which is a total overall increase on their pay by 46.8%. And this 46.8% in comparison to the previous slide of the more senior flight attendant at 28.0% is one of the reasons why you saw the noticeable change in the pay rates for the top of scale versus the steps 1 through 13. We move on to our next example here in year 5. We'll do 2 examples of a flight attendant working their line average of 80 TFP and 1 working the 480. In this example, the current rate is 33.67 for a total of 26.9360 at 80 TFP and 1346.80 at 40 TFP. The new rate of 42.50 would put the 80 TFP line value at 3,400 and the 40 TFP line value at 1,700. This makes for an increase of $706.40 working 80 TFP and $353.20 working 40 TFP. When you include the 22 boardings for the 80 TFP and the 11 boardings for the 40 TFP, that brings us to $467.50 for the flight attendant working 80 TFP and $233.75 for the flight attendant working 40 TFP. That's a total pay increase with working the same exact schedule for the flight attendant working 80 TFP of $3,867.50, and the flight attendant working 40 TFP will see $1,933.75. A total increase of $1,173.90 for the 80 TFP and $586.96 for the 40 TFP, for a total increase of 43.6% with no change to flying. We'll continue to work through the pay scales with these examples. Year 10, current rate 45.82, 36.65.60 for a flight attendant working 80 TFP, 18.32.80 for 40 TFP. The new TA2 rate will be set at $58. You'll see the new rate at $46.40 for 80 TFP and $23.20 for 40 TFP. That actualizes to a dollar amount increase of $974.40 for the 80 TFP and $487.20 for the 40 TFP. When we include the 22 and 11 boardings for 80 and 40 TFP respectively, you'll see that it's $638 increase for the 80 TFP and a $319 increase for 40 TFP. That brings the total pay for the new TA2 rates to $5,278 working 80 TFP at year 10 with 22 boardings and $2,639 for working 40 TFP with 11 boardings. That's $1612.40 for 80 TFP for a dollar amount increase, and a dollar amount increase of $806.20 for someone flying 40 TFP. A total percent increase of 44.0% for year 10 flight attendants. In the next example, we'll use year 12, currently at $52.50. The flight attendant flying 80 would have $4,200. The one flying 40 would have $2,100. Under the new TA2 rates of $62.25, the new rate would pay $4,980 for 80 TFP and $2,490 for 40 TFP. That's a dollar amount increase of $780 for the 80 TFP and $390 for 40 TFP. Then we'll take the 22 boardings at 80 TFP and the 11 at 40 for an increase of $684.75 for 80 TFP and $342.38 for 40 TFP worked. That's a TA2 total pay of $5,664.75 for year 12 flying 80 TFP and $2,832.38 for year 12 flying 40 TFP, for a total dollar amount increase of $1,464.75 for 80 and 732.38 for 40 TFP. A total percent increase of 34.9%.
So let's take a look at how flight attendants step through the pay scale and how the combination of occupational seniority increases and annual increases to the pay scale compound to increase earning power. We'll take a year 6 example. A year 6 flight attendant today earns $37.94. On March 2nd, under the TA, that rate will go to $48. On the flight attendant's anniversary date, that will step to $52.50. On the anniversary date of the agreement, that will go to $54.08. On the flight attendant's anniversary date, they will go to $55.88. On the last anniversary date of the agreement, that rate will go to $57.66. And then on the flight attendant's anniversary date, they will go to $59.41. That is an increase of $21.47 over the life of this agreement, or a 56.6% increase in pay rate. Continuing stepping through the pay scale examples, we'll look at an example from year 4. Currently, the pay rate is $32.26. If you take, for example, a Seattle-Las Vegas turn, which is worth 5.2 TFP, 32.26 at 5.2 pays out $167.75. The increase in TA2 on March 2nd, 2025, increases the rate to $38.50. So the Seattle-Las Vegas turn is still worth 5.2 TFP. However, boarding pay is worth an additional TFP. So the total TFP for the sequence is 6.2 TFP. If you take $38.50, the new pay rate, times 6.2, it is equal to $238.70. That's an increase of $70.95, or 42.3% increase for the turn. On the last year of the agreement, that rate goes to $55.70. So now if we look at the Seattle-Las Vegas turn, which is 5.2 TFP, the boarding is an additional TFP. So the total TFP value of the pairing is 6.2 TFP. If you take the pay rate of $55.70 times 6.2 TFP, that's equivalent to $345.34. That's an increase of $177.59, or a 105.9% increase in the value of that pairing.
Now we're going to talk about some pay components. In this new agreement, we have restored longevity pay, $1 at 16 years of service. A pay increased to $4 on 3/2/2025. We eliminated the phase-in. We restored New Year's Day holiday with no added holidays, and we clarified holiday RON paid at 4 TFP if on a layover with no duty during holiday, functions like sick pay. Line holders paid if scheduled and not achieved. Reserves paid only if achieved. Not paid if flight attendants call out sick. Added to the list of exclusions for pay protection.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the market rate adjustment letter of agreement. We will receive the greater of the downline increase or the increase achieved by averaging the top of scale pay rates for United after a new agreement is in place, American, Delta, Southwest, and JetBlue. Any carriers that are paid in block will be converted to TFP for comparison, and the conversion ratio is based on a 12-month trailing average. Any carriers without boarding pay will have the top of scale rate reduced by 9.6% to account for boarding. Carriers with boarding pay, there will be no reduction to the top of scale rate. If any carrier implements a new pay system, such as deplaning pay or hourly, AFA and the company will meet to resolve how the new pay system is accounted for in the new MRA language. And in the meantime, the carrier will be dropped from the MRA calculation until an agreement can be reached on an appropriate comparison.
Sick leave cash out. Currently 25% payout if you have 0.1 to 560.9 TFP in bank at retirement. 50% payout, that's 100% increase at 561 to 849.9 TFP in bank at retirement. And 100% payout, which is a 300% increase, 850 plus TFP in bank at retirement. We added this in TA2, 100% payout. That's a 300% increase at 30 plus occupational years of service. That's regardless of the sick bank balance. 401k match increases to 8% on 3/2/2025, increases to 8.5% on 3/2/2026, a year earlier than in TA1.
Now we're going to talk about the Productivity Premium Program and how it is structured in TA2. The Productivity Premium Program highlights are, we're dividing into 2 blocks of months. The total payout for the PPP program will be $2,500, which is the same as it is in the current book, and this is a reduction from the TA1 language. Boarding, TFP, vacation, company business, and union business all count towards the TFP requirements to achieve PPP. We're now going to talk about how state bank sick leave usage interacts with the TFP requirements to achieve PPP. January 25, February 25, and any months without state bank sick leave implemented will require an average of 5 TFP above your line award to qualify for that month. After state bank sick leave is implemented, each month will require an average of 10 TFP above your line award to count. Now, the PPP program is being implemented mid-year. So due to the mid-year PPP implementation, we will have a hybrid structure for the year of 2025. So the PPP program only for the year 2025, we will maintain the current CB 8-month block, which is January, February, March, April, May, September, October, and November. This block will pay out $1,100, which will pay out in December, which is how it's currently done now. 40 TFP over your line award and 1 block to achieve the PPP program. That averages out to about 5 TFP per month. The new TA2 block 2 will be June, July, August, and December. Now, these will not be standalone months like they currently are. This will now be a block of months. This whole block will pay out $2,000, which will be paid in January because the last qualifying month is December. 20 TFP over the line award in the block to achieve the PPP, which again averages to 5 TFP per month. However, any month where the state bank sick leave is implemented, the requiring amount will increase by 5 TFP. And we'll show you what that looks like on the next slide. So here's an example. If we're looking at the current 8-month block, in January, state sick leave has not been implemented yet. So the requirement to achieve PPP would be 5 TFP over your line award for the month of January. The same goes for February at 5 TFP, March and April, both at 5 TFP. Now in May 2025, the company implements state bank. That would require a flight attendant to fly or to be credited an additional 10 TFP in that month to qualify for the PPP. And that would carry on for the rest of that block. So September, October, November would require a total of 10 extra to qualify for that. That would bring the grand total to 60 TFP over that entire block to qualify. I want to call out that it's not per month. The amount of TFP is the average over the 8-month block, which is what the current practice is now. This just gives you an example of what would happen based upon when the state bank sick leave is implemented. Now looking at the new block 2, which is June, July, August, and December, because state bank implementation happened in May, those months would all require 10 TFP for a total of 40 over the course of that block. We're now going to talk about the PPP program for the year 2026 and beyond. As mentioned earlier, we will have 2 blocks going forward. Block 1 will be comprised of the months March, April, and May. This block will pay out $500, which will be paid out in June. In order to qualify for the PPP payment for this block, You must be credited 30 TFP over your line award in the blocks to achieve this, which averages 10 TFP per month. In block 2, which is June, July, August, and December, this block will pay $2,000, which will be paid in January of the following year. In order to qualify for block 2, you would need to work 40 TFP over your line award, again, which averages 10 TFP per month. A change to the program starting in 2026, the months of January, February, September, October, and November will no longer be part of the PPP program. There is a note at the bottom that if for some reason that state bank sick leave is not implemented, your requirement to achieve over your line award will be reduced by 5 for every month that the banks are not implemented.
Let's now talk about retropay. If TA2 passes, based on all the TFP paid in the time period that we're going to talk about, we expect the retropay to be paid on the April 18th paycheck because April the 20th this year falls on a weekend. So there'll be a 3% payout on all TFP from December 2022 to November 2023, so a whole year. And for comparison, it was 3% in American and Southwest for the first year of retro. There'll be a 6.1% payout for all TFP from December 2023 to April 2024, or 5 months. For comparison, it was 4% in American and 6.09% at Southwest for the second year of retro. And then it'll be 100% for the TA2 pay rates. That's all TFP from May 2024 to present, or 10 months. Once again, for comparison, it was 4% in American and 9.27% at Southwest for the third year of retro. And there will be a retro pay calculator available that will show your individual retro pay. Next, we're going to talk about the Management Immersion Letter of Agreement. As a review, this was covered in TA1, and this allows Management Immersion program to expand to in-flight. It currently exists for most other labor groups, such as stations, reservations, ramp, and SOC. In TA2, we've been able to limit this to approximately 100 managing directors and above. We've also limited it to only 2 flights per experience per individual every other year. It requires 24-hour advance notification to the crew. And there is a carve-out for approximately 30 vice presidents and above. They are not subject to the above restrictions. So for the, say, the COOs, CEOs of Alaska, if they would like to get up and help out on the cart, then they can do so without all the other restrictions involved here, but only 30 of them in the whole company. Additionally, the company will consider the in-flight service committee's recommendations regarding which flights are available for immersion. And this is to ensure that they represent the general flight attendant experience. So they can't just pick their favorite flights to go on. It has to be more representative of what we fly as flight attendants. So to review the Management Immersion program, this is where non-in-flight management can perform limited duties on board as a peer. They essentially are doing just like a service flight, like the trainees, which is trash and recycling, pre-departure service, beverage and meal cart, etc., as long as the seatbelt is off and it's safe to do so. They remain under the direction of the flight attendant. They cannot occupy a jump seat without a flight attendant FAA certificate, and they cannot perform safety duties. Flight attendants are protected from single source discipline under this letter of agreement, and AFA may terminate this letter if there is any dispute over single source discipline during the term of this agreement. Next, we're going to go through provision updates. We will cover Section 8 hours of service, 9E premium open time, 10 scheduling, 11 reserve, 12 exchange of sequences, 15D maternity leave, plus Section 16, 25, 27, 30, 32, 33, and 34. First, hours of service. Section 8.0, the deadhead duty applications. This clarifies that flight attendants must call crew scheduling if their surface deadhead is any amount of time longer than scheduled, and that is so that they can get paid appropriately, and also to track their duty time for FAR purposes. Section 8 is natural disasters, etc. We'll cover this a little bit more in detail when we get to Section 34 regarding day rooms while you are on an 8S pairing. AQ contactability. and this is clarifying the new block-to-block messaging functionality. We clarified a block-to-block message can only be sent if a flight is open on a flight hence schedule, but no earlier than the start of each duty period. For the first 3 months after implementation of block-to-block messaging, flight hents may request review if they feel there's an error that was made with their block-to-block messaging. AFA and the company will meet to review any disputes. Additionally, AFA representatives will be involved in development and testing, which is providing feedback and concerns, and the new block-to-block messaging functionality will not be implemented prior to the system proving reliable and consistent. Next up is 9E Premium Open Time, and this is cancellation with less than 2 hours of notice prior to your initial scheduled check-in. So this clarifies if the premium open time sequence changes due to reassignment, and the flight attendant flies, including surface deadhead, more than scheduled, the flying above schedule will be paid at 1.5 times your trip rate on a day-for-day basis. For example, if you pick up an original sequence picked up at double time, say Seattle to San Diego, 3 TFP, and then returned another 3 TFP. If you were reassigned to an Anchorage turn out of Seattle, 4 TFP and 4 TFP for each leg, then your pay would be 8 TFP total. Under TA2, 6 TFP would be paid at double time, and 2 TFP would be paid at double time and a half for the overscheduled flying.
Next, we're going to walk through 10 scheduling. These will be changes from TA1. In 10F, planned absences and carry-ins, we clarified that there is no change to the current process for UBCB bid credit. We are back to current book. We recognized during the implementation process discussions that it was not possible to program the UBCB in the way that we had written it, and that it was not exactly how it was done internally. So this is just a programming language issue. And so JCBA, I'm confident, will be able to address the issues and concerns we have with the current language and make sure that it is reflective of the actual process that is done during PBS bid credits. 10I, bidding while withheld from service. Added that when a flight attendant is precluded from being awarded flying into stations where they do not meet government requirements, the notification must be submitted prior to the first of the calendar month prior to bidding for the following month. An example of that would be that we'll be bidding for our March schedule shortly. So if I wanted to submit for March flying, I would need to submit that by February 1st in order for that preclusion to be administered for my March flying. In 10S pre-cancellation, we changed the term to pre-cancel pickup rather than pre-cancellation self-assignment. Again, this just has to do with programming. In crew access, the programmers use self-assignment and it triggers very specific actions in regards to reserve self-assignment. And we want pre-cancellation pickup to operate just a little differently, so they need another name for that. In 10R reassignment, in TA1, we achieved 1.5 times pay for the entire sequence, greater of actual or scheduled on a day-for-day basis. Currently, it's only 1.5 times pay for greater than scheduled flying on a day-for-day basis. We maintain that from TA1. We did add some clarifications on the exclusions for 10R reassignments, and those include ground activities, excluding surface deadheads, such as aircraft swaps, pre-boarding, adjustments of ground transportation, ground training, and drug alcohol testing, as well as pairing changes resulting from a flight attendant-initiated scheduling change. That includes deadheads not needed, waiving your surface deadhead, trading at a sit, jet bridge trades, fatigue programs, commuter recovery, scheduling adjustments resulting from waiving CBA legalities like base turn revisions. All of those scheduling changes are initiated by flight attendants and would not result in reassignment pay. We've included some examples of how reassignment pay will be paid in TA2. In this example, the original pairing was a 2-day Fort Lauderdale worth 14.2, and the flight attendant was reassigned to a 2-day YVR worth 14.7. On day 1, the flight attendant will now receive 1 TFP at 1.5 times for flights flown, 3 TFP at 1.5 times for the DPM, and 3.2 TFP at 1.5 times for the premium guarantee on the flights that were not made up in that sequence. On day 2, the flight attendant will receive 7.7 TFP at 1.5 times for flights flown. The current total prior to TA1 value of this trip would be 14.4 TFP at straight time and 0.5 TFP at 1.5 times. Under TA2, the new value of the trip will be 14.9 TFP at 1.5 times. In this next example, the flight attendant originally had Maui worth 14 TFP and was reassigned to a Fort Lauderdale worth 14.4 TFP. Under TA2 pay, day 1 would be paid at 7.2 TFP at 1.5 times for flights flown, and day 2 will be paid at 7.2 TFP at 1.5 times for flights flown. The current total for this trip would be 14 TFP at straight time and 0.4 TFP at 1.5 times. The new TA2 total value would be 14.4 TFP, all paid at 1.5 times. In 10V, responsibility of crew scheduling, we removed the reference to reserve board. We also clarified the annotation of schedule modification will not be part of pairing details, as in doing our research with Jeppesen, crew access is not capable of housing that information in pairing details. However, flight attendants will still have a reference available for them and viewable in crew access, just not in that particular area. The company is working on programming and implementation for 10V. In 10X7, working in lieu of deadhead, we clarified that 1.5 times deadhead conversion premium also applies if the flight attendant is converted from deadhead to working on an earlier or later flight if the same city pairs exist. An example of this would be if a flight attendant originally had a San Diego Portland turn and they were scheduled to deadhead at 6 a.m. They were removed from their flight and placed as a working crew member on the 8 a.m. flight so that they can make their connection back to San Diego. That conversion from one flight to the other in the reassignment section would not include reassignment, and under the previous TA1 language in 10X7 would not be included in the deadhead premium for that leg. However, we were able to secure that if that change occurs, the flight attendant will be paid 1.5 times for the leg that they work from San Diego to Portland. In 10X9, deadhead meal settlement and LOA, we have increased the total amount for being paid in lieu of the complimentary meal on SkyWest or Horizon from $5 to $8. In 10DD, 10E, the open positions on a 4K sequence in regards to reserves, all 4K flying will be paid 1.5 times the rate for reserves if they are assigned the 4K sequence by a crew scheduler. This now excludes self-assigned 4Ks. During our surveys, we did hear concerns from line holders that there is no way or mechanisms for them to opt in or self-assign into 4Ks at a premium rate. And so we did hear you loud and clear, and we made sure that this provision only applies when a reserve is forced to fly a 4K, which is higher and greater than our 1030 duty day, which line holders can avoid and reserves are not able to avoid.
Now I'll take us through some of the changes in the reserve section. 11C3b ER conversion. We have restored the maximum 3 involuntary ER conversion cap. We heard you loud and clear that that was very important to flight attendants, and that has been restored. Reserves obviously can volunteer for additional conversions, and all ER conversions made by crew scheduling are paid at 2 times the rate for the converted duty period. We clarified only conversions by the company in crew scheduling, not conversions that result from trading or picking up. Another change is reserves who volunteer for ER conversion are assigned first in reserve assignment list order. The reserves who do not volunteer will be assigned after volunteers in reserve assignment list order, provided they have not met the maximum 3 ER conversions for the month. Obviously, they would be excluded. 11D7b release to report. We clarified that notification of granted requests from contactability will be sent via the company email, similar to the way personal drops are handled today. And if the notification is not received, then the release from contactability is not granted. We also clarified that the timeline is in Pacific time, and the first day of the block must be after a day without any reserve duty. Another change in TA2 is 11E, self-assigned airport standby. AM and PM reserves with 5 or more days in a block can self-assign airport standby. TA1 allowed for ER and 4 or more day reserve block flight attendants to self-assign airport standby. In 11G, reserve compensation, we clarified the 5 TFP that is paid to a reserve who is not used during a contractual holiday would be paid at 1 times the rate above guarantee and would not impact the reserve assignment list. Now moving on to section 12, exchange of sequences. 12H, out of domicile trades, pickups, drops, or giveaways. This is a change in TA2. TA2 will allow a total of 4 out of domicile pickups per month from any domicile other than your own. This is a change from TA, which allowed 2 pickups per domicile per month. We also removed the ability to pick up out of domicile reserve blocks. TA1 had added that ability. An important reason for these changes in section 12 is because when we got into the implementation discussion, it was very clear that the programming change needed to affect these changes that were in TA1 would have required years, and that we didn't want to overpromise and underdeliver and have flight attendants waiting for these changes and not be able to do them. So the changes were made in TA2 that can be done very quickly. Also, we removed the open time drop limit report programming update that would be viewable for flight attendants out of domicile. That is also a programming challenge that would take a long time to implement.
15D, maternity leave. We maintain presumptive disability after 28th week of pregnancy. Flight attendant may continue to work with a note from their doctor. Because the flight attendant may continue working, this does not conflict with the law. We were able to change the language from TA1, 16A, sick leave accrual. Clarified sick leave is accrued to the nearest 10th. 25J, pandemic provision. Removed inoculations reference from the new provision addresses declared the pandemic significantly impacting operations.
Next, we're going to talk about our insurance premiums. We know that this was an important topic of discussion with the TA1, so we're going to talk about what we've done to enhance our insurance premiums for the TA2. Before we get into the changes, we're going to first discuss how insurance premiums actually work and where we're actually at when it comes to the amount that we are paying for our insurance. All labor groups on property have a 20% cost share with the company, where the company pays the remaining 80%. What that means is if the insurance premiums were $1,000 total, that the flight attendant would be responsible for $200 of that, which is 20%, and the company would pick up the remaining 80% or $800. Now, our regular PPO contributions have actually been frozen since 2019, where we were paying a 20% cost share. What that means is since our dollar amount was actually frozen, insurance premiums have gone up over time, but because we're paying the same dollar amount that we did in 2019, our effective contribution is actually at 15.6%. So our contract specifies that we should be paying 20%, but because of that rate freeze in 2019, we're actually paying below that 20% cost share, and we actually have the lowest insurance premiums of any labor group on property. Those 2019 rates will maintain until a successor agreement is in place, which TA2, if ratified, would be that successor agreement. However, we've negotiated significant cost caps in the new insurance program that we're going to go into next. In TA2, In 2026, our regular PPO contributions will not increase any more than 3%. Currently, we have a cost cap provision in there that's a 15%. However, we were able to secure 3%, which will show you in the next slide how minimal of an increase that actually is. In 2027 and beyond, our regular PPO contributions will not increase any more than 8%, and that's going to be for any subsequent year of this contract. Once again, we will never pay any more than 20% of our cost share. That is our ultimate, responsibility, but we will never pay any more than that. The regular PPO insurance program is the only program that is in our contract in terms of having these cost caps. However, we know that the company does offer the Consumer Choice PPO program as well for insurance. We do have a provision in TA2 that ensures that if the Consumer Choice PPO insurance premiums skyrocket, that we will never pay any more than the regular PPO cost for that insurance. So in essence, it's like a catch-all that makes it so even though we haven't directly negotiated the rates for the Consumer Choice, there's a catch that we will never pay more than what the negotiated rates are for the PPO program. Again, the next slide, we're going to highlight what the changes are and what you can expect to pay based upon your specific situation. We're going to first discuss the insurance premiums for the employee-only plan. Currently, our monthly premium is $166.03. This is that locked-in rate from 2019. If you factor in a 3% maximum increase, the most that your insurance could go up for 2026 is $4.98 if you're on this employee-only program. To put this in perspective, if we were paying the full 20% cost share at current rates, our insurance premiums would actually be $208. So this is a significant decrease from what the rates should be. Looking into 2027, the subsequent year, with the maximum 8% increase, the maximum you could see your insurance premium go up would be $13.68 for a total monthly premium of $184.69. Again, this is 8% year after year until the next successor agreement is ratified. So for 2028, factoring that 8% maximum increase, the maximum rate could go up from the prior year would be $14.78, which would bring the monthly premium to $199.48. So if you compare that to what we should be paying at $208 now, this is minimal increases over the next couple of years. We're not going to go into what the situation is like for every other insurance family scenario that you might have. However, this roadshow will show you the cost breakdown for the employee with a spouse, the employee with children, or if you elect to have the employee with the family insurance program. All right, moving on to Section 27, General Association. In Section 27P, Company Business Flight Pay Loss, the UBCB override has been increased to 9.6% from TA1, which was at 8%. And this is just to reflect the change in boarding pay, the increase in that from 0.42 to 0.5, because it is an effective raise of 9.6%. That is just reflected here. So for the UBCB override, 5% in lieu of per diem, which is current book. And then the override changes 9.6 instead of the 8 in TA1. In Section 30 training, we did some cleanup here. That's all that happened. There was a provision that's actually illegal per FAA because you're not allowed to reduce below 10 hours of minimum rest. So this provision actually is just not applicable anymore. So we just struck it from the book. Section 32 attendance policy. We made a clarification to the no-show definition. Prior to block-to-block messaging, a reserve was required to check email at the completion of their sequence because that email, the block-to-block is now the method to do that. So we just changed email with the block-to-block messaging requirement. Regarding Section 32G, record improvement, we know the quarterly point reduction form was high on our flight attendants list. For 2025 only, we were able to maintain the 4th quarterly point reduction form. However, starting in year 2026 and beyond, we will move to 3-point reductions form versus the 4. However, state sick leave does not accrue points. So the methodology here is as state sick leave is implemented in 2025, which is the plan, flight attendants will have the ability to accrue state sick leave, which protects them, but also maintain that fourth quarterly point reduction form. And it kind of serves as like a training wheels or a way to get familiar with the new system. However, starting in 2026, we will be going to 3-point reduction forms. In Section 33 charters, it was just a language clarification or cleanup here, addressing reserves and charters that are posted less than 8 hours and how that's assigned. Section 34, lodging and transportation. The allusion was made to 8S pairings here, and this is where we clarify that. So 8S pairings, the whole idea behind an 8S pairing is we want to get flight attendants out of that location as soon as possible because of natural disaster or just a situation that it was not safe for a flight attendant to be in. There is the chance, however, that a pairing could be made where there is ground time that is greater than 4 hours where a flight attendant would be eligible for a day room. However, because we want to get them out of there, a day room will not be provided. So in lieu of that, because this provision does provide benefits to flight attendants, we were able to secure that in lieu of providing a day room in this situation, that a flight attendant would actually be paid the contracted rate of the hotel as compensation in lieu of the day room. Section 34B3 transportation. There's a clause in the contract or the TA that Section 34B3 transportation. There's a clause in TA2 that basically kind of puts a fence on the amount of transit time to get from your hotel to the airport. However, some airport locations, the amount of time that it takes to get from the curb to the gate is in excess of 15 minutes. And the examples of those airports would be Atlanta, Denver, Salt Lake City, and JFK. Those are airports that currently the time that it takes to get from the curb to the gate is longer than 15 minutes, which has resulted in delays of flights. So what this provision is the parties will mutually develop and maintain a review process to look at these airports that have delays associated with the curb to gate time, and will readjust the transportation time to allow for more time in specific situations. And finally, management discretion. We removed a management discretion language from the mentioned sections below.
So here are the TA2 additional resources. All of them are available at contract2022.afaalaska.org/TA2. That will include the TA2 text, TA2 summary booklet, TA2 comprehensive summary, provision explanations for compensation, stepping through the pay scale, contactability, ER changes, insurance premiums, management immersion, and sick leave and attendance, as well as FAQs, voting information, and industry comparison. Okay, now let's talk about the TA2 timeline. On February the 1st at 9 a.m. Pacific time, we'll have our first virtual Q&A session. Next session will be on February the 3rd at 9 a.m. Our third session on February the 5th at 3 p.m. And our fourth session on February the 7th at 3 p.m. Again, these are all in Pacific time. The TA2 vote opens on February the 11th, which will be the same day as our base sit kickoff. And the TA2 voting will close on February the 28th, and the results will be published shortly thereafter. And March the 2nd is the start of implementation.
Thank you for watching this roadshow video and educating yourself on the elements of this tentative agreement. The TA2 delivers many improvements to your current contract. Boarding pay that is the highest in the industry, and that drives an average increase in pay of 9.6% on top of the TA pay rate increases. Additionally, the pay step rate increases and improvements in pay premiums ensure some of the highest compensation in the entire industry. This is in addition to the improved 401k match, the insurance cost caps, increased per diem, and other improvements outlined in this presentation. It is essential to understand that going back to secure a TA3 is very doubtful. Our federal mediator and the National Mediation Board have told us very clearly that should TA2 not be ratified, they would be unlikely to devote further resources to mediating a TA3. And management also indicated they will allocate their bargaining resources towards merger considerations and the joint contract negotiations. The Alaska-Hawaiian Joint Collective Bargaining, or JCBA negotiations, launch in March, and the TA2 provides a solid platform to begin those talks. JCBA bargaining would build on the TA2 improvements. Otherwise, our starting point would be your current contract. The options before us are clear. Your vote will either solidify the enhancements secured in TA2, or it will indicate your desire to retain your current contract without any improvements in pay and working conditions until the joint contract is reached. For all these reasons, your negotiating committee recommends a 4 vote on this tentative agreement. Thanks for watching.